Revival in Northern California. Rising floodwaters force hundreds to evacuate, and the worst might still be on the way. In another part of the Bay Area, mudslides take their toll. We'll show you how people are fighting to save what they can. And the South Bay Area that might finally be giving in to Mother Nature. In Napa, a community building walls of sand against the rising floodwaters. But the way the rain keeps coming down, the sand may not hold. Good evening. Topping Nightcast, the flooding in Napa epitomizes the misery brought on by 6 straight days of rain. More than 400 people in Napa now have been driven out of their homes. New evacuations, even worse flooding are predicted. Nightcast reporter Dave Bryan is standing by in Napa with a live report. Dave?
Well, Dave, right now, although it is quite windy here, the rain has let up for the moment, and that is indeed fortunate because this is a critical hour. An hour that officials here in Napa have been dreading for most of the night. This is the hour of high tide on the Napa River. The river expected to hit a level that it hasn't reached in several decades. All in all, it's been a horrendous night. Many people, as you said, stranded by floodwaters had to be rescued. Police have been blocking traffic in and out of Napa except for people who live here. And at this hour, we understand all but one of the emergency shelters in Napa are completely filled. If there has been a worse night, nobody around here can remember when.
You have to go.
The night was filled with dramatic rescues like this along the banks of the Napa River, as firefighters and volunteers in boats had to get tough, with Napa residents reluctant to leave their homes, even as the rivers swelled to levels rarely seen during this century. The trauma of the night can be seen in the eyes and faces of the stranded.
Yeah, I was a diehard and stayed behind.
You were a diehard and stayed behind.
Because I didn't want to turn my cat loose to fend for itself.
Hundreds of evacuees, young and old, were floated to safety, some of them with only the clothes on their back, but all of them glad to be alive.
I just want us all to stay together.
Yeah, scared to death.
There's your bag.
Yes.
It was up to my knee when we got off at 10 a.m. this morning.
Those who were rescued boarded school buses to be taken away to emergency shelters, themselves lit by candlelight and heated by firepower. Police directed traffic at dark intersections. Much of the city of Napa left without power when a PG&E substation flooded. Earlier this evening, merchants in central Napa sandbagged buildings and businesses, trying to keep out, in some cases literally trying to bail out, the angry Napa River that was threatening to take out even bridges that normally tower over the water.
I lived in my house 20 years, the first time we ever had to leave.
We're expecting it to be 3 or 4 feet higher, and if it does, the big windows are coming in. There's just no doubt about it.
Right now, it's only 5:30, and the water here in central Napa is already several feet deep in spots. But the worst news for residents and businesses here is that high tide is not expected for another 5.5 hours. By tonight, as more Napa residents were led to safety, the river continued to soar to its crest, and fire and rescue officials nervously eyed shaky levees.
The Napa River is about 1 foot from going over the levee on the west bank, and if that happens, I'm concerned that the entire Stonehouse area may be heavily flooded.
At this hour, the Napa River expected to crest at 30 feet, the highest level in 23 years. One of the big problems in this area tonight, power outages. At some points during the day, as many as 18,000 people were in the dark just in Napa County alone. And in other Napa County communities, it's been a rough day also. Communities like Calistoga and St. Helena, where there has also been flooding, and there were rescues and evacuations. With the Live Eye in Napa, I'm Dave Bryan. Dave, back to you.
Thank you, Dave. More than one person in Napa pointed out tonight that the streets now have currents in them. Highway 29, the main route through the Napa Valley, is closed. Wendy?
Around Guerneville, the Rush River has flooded hundreds of people out of their homes, and the waters are still rising tonight. Longtime residents say it is the worst flooding they have seen in decades. More than 500 people have been forced to head for temporary shelters. Emergency officials expect the river to crest sometime tomorrow at around 49 to 50 feet. That is the highest it has been since flooding back in 1955, when it hit 47.5 feet. Flooding has also caused a lot of problems for people in Marin County. Jim Bunn is standing by right now in Corte Madera with a look at the situation there. Jim.
Well, Wendy, believe it or not, the rain has actually let up a little bit here in Marin County. It's still a bit windy, and the water level has begun to drop just a little bit. Now, right behind me here, this is part of an effort by Corte Madera town officials to pump some of the excess water out of the canal system here. This is a real good example of the big problem that a lot of people have been dealing with here in Marin County tonight, where to put all the excess water that's come down. As the storm howled into its 5th night, the villain for much of Marin County was Corte Madera Creek. It continues to surge out of its banks tonight into the homes of people like Rene Rousseau.
This has been the longest, really, of all the floods we had, so really all, for like 2 days in a row. 82 was just like overnight and it was gone again, but this is really the worst.
Perhaps the most frightening moment of the evening happened here on this hillside in Fairfax, when this hill literally came crashing through this home with 4 people inside.
How did you guys know to come up here?
Well, we were down there having coffee when we heard like an explosion. So right away the wife ran out, and, well, when you live on the hillside, you've got to be kind of prone to this kind of thing.
This home is in Fairfax. It's one of a number in Marin County that have been reported damaged or destroyed by mudslides during this storm. For people in the town of Ross, it has been a night to keep a watchful eye on the sandbags by the creek. Don and Leslie Aarons saw their general store take heavy damage during the floods of 1982. But this time they decided to stick it out and fight it.
We've sandbagged, made a levee out in front. I've got 2 pumps going in the back to try to keep the water out.
We are more prepared. We came in last night, got everything up. This time we're determined to stay here and hopefully fight it off.
Obviously, the pressure of the flood, particularly on this pipe system here in Corte Madera, is considerable. Now, one of the other pieces of good news this evening from Marin County is the fact that, at least as far as we could tell, there were no evacuations from any of the homes in any of the low-lying areas where Corte Madera Creek was getting up into it. Basically, what happened were people who had been here before decided that they could stick this one out, sandbag their homes, and at least weather it that way. That's the latest from here in Marin County. I'm Jim Bunn. Wendy, back to you.
Thanks a lot, Jim. The 4 people who were in that house in Fairfax are all in the hospital tonight. 1 woman is in serious condition. The other 3 are said to have minor injuries, but they're going to be held overnight anyway. Hundreds of people are spending the night in shelters in Vacaville. The Red Cross is setting up beds in a high school gymnasium there. The families were driven out when the city's storm drains overflowed this afternoon. Officials say waters in the fields in the area started seeping into the drain system. In some places, the water was actually bubbling back up through manhole covers.
Tonight, some people near Lexington Reservoir in the South Bay are also being evacuated. The area devastated by brush fires last summer. And Eyewitness News reporter Sherry Hu says that's increased the danger of mudslides now.
Emergency workers are now stockpiling sandbags for the Lexington area community, a sign that the worst may be just hours away. No one is being forced to evacuate yet, but some homeowners like Marilee Hart say the only sensible thing to do at this point is to leave.
There's like 3 waterfalls on my property right now. This is the worst I've seen it in 5 years. And it's just like, it's not healthy. The ground has reached a saturation point.
Neighbors say that runoff water is no longer clear but muddy, meaning that the soil above is starting to wash down. Geologists say they're afraid of possible mudslides and flooding like this, which already closed a local bridge. Last summer's major wildfire in the area burned right down to the roots. Jaron Benotti, another evacuee, says that makes him feel vulnerable because there's little left for the dirt to hold on to.
One thing that was nice about the fire, if there's such a thing as can be nice, is at least you felt like if you lost things, you were covered. There's no insurance for the mudslides.
The county hasn't assumed that all of the evacuees will have a place to stay, so the Red Cross has set up 2 emergency shelters for tonight, one in Morgan Hill and the other one here in Los Gatos. Mike Blaisdell grabbed only his wallet before leaving the house. Tonight, his warm bed will be in the high school gym instead of his home. Emergency crews will be working around the clock tonight and watching. This is considered the critical period, and it's no exaggeration to say that tonight, people are on edge. In Santa Clara County, Sherry Hu, Channel 5 Eyewitness News.
Also in the South Bay, floods have driven hundreds from their homes in Morgan Hill. Tonight, the Red Cross has set up a shelter for them at Live Oak High School. Flood warnings have now been extended for a number of counties here in the Bay Area. The warnings in effect in Marin, Alameda, San Mateo, and Santa Clara counties, also Contra Costa County, as well as Mendocino, Sonoma, Solano, Santa Cruz, and Sacramento counties. The flood warnings will now...
Same thing about the people here in Sonoma County, Vic. Everybody's been really generous and helpful with us today, as well as trying to deal with what is becoming an increasingly worse situation. There are about 5,000 people in the Guerneville area alone, and those people are stranded. They're cut off from the outside world. A little while ago, about 2 hours ago, and we got word that a National Guard truck had gone into Monte Rio to try and get about 60 people out there and bring them back to a Red Cross shelter at the Veterans Auditorium in Santa Rosa. No word yet on when they'll get here or how they will get here, since almost all of the roads in the county are almost impassable, and the going is tough. Roads throughout Sonoma County are closed, and that includes the roads into and out of Guerneville, which is isolated tonight. This family finally left the Guerneville area and is now at a Red Cross center in Santa Rosa for the night. They are one of a few families that did get out before the floods closed the roads.
We barely got out.
I walked from the bridge.
Yeah, we went through pretty high waters. If we hadn't had a van that was pretty high up, we probably wouldn't have made it.
Her husband said they fought the waters for the last 3 days.
We dug drainage ditches to try to alleviate the water buildup, tried to put up earthen dams, and it was just useless. As soon as we got them built, they'd wash right out.
This is what they were fighting, the Russian River, at a height of 48 feet, flooding low-lying towns along its banks. That includes Forestville, where cars were buried and electricity went out. And county officials were trying to get help in and figure out why so many people were stranded.
The river crested once it went down. It was predicted at 42 feet. This storm, according to the experts, is not following any of the patterns.
Now, the reason there were not more people in that shelter is the same thing that Vic had mentioned a couple of moments ago. People are really worried about their homes being looted. It happened during the storms in '82, and a lot of folks along the river up here just won't leave because they don't want to get ripped off on top of having to clean up the flood damage. The National Guard has a lot of problems tonight. People in Napa need help from them, and so do the people here in Sonoma County. We expect to see them rolling again tomorrow morning, and with help from the 6th Army with helicopters coming in tomorrow as soon as it gets light, and if the wind dies down a little bit so they can start taking supplies into Guerneville. Sylvia, Jim?
Lila, we'd like to thank you and Vic Lee for braving the storm all day and into the night to bring us these reports. Thank you very much from the hard-hit North Bay areas tonight.
And our cameras as well, our camera people.
Absolutely, they're doing a wonderful job. And flooding is a big danger in Marin County as well tonight. The heavy rain has triggered small mudslides, and there's been scattered damage. And as News Center 4's Carl Sonkin reports, for Marin residents, the storm is proving to be an anxious waiting game at this point.
Around 4 this afternoon, this house outside Fairfax was crushed by a mudslide, sending 3 people who lived here to the hospital. A neighbor found the victims outside the wreckage.
They were buried in mud, but they were crawling, and the girl was hurt.
Please evacuate the downtown area.
Then around 6 tonight, San Anselmo police ordered downtown evacuated as the creek, which runs right through town under some stores, rose dangerously close to flood stage. The flood alarm bell is still ringing tonight, even though what used to be sleepy little San Anselmo Creek has dropped somewhat tonight.
We have about 14 people right now.
Tonight, the Red Cross set up an evacuation center in San Anselmo. Blankets, coffee, and donated food for frightened folk who left homes close to the creek.
I was very scared.
Many of the volunteers are neighbors helping neighbors.
Community is what this is all about.
Some who chose to stay started pumping out their houses. Reno Russo was lucky the rising creek only filled his basement, but others weren't so lucky.
Sort of a little game of wait and see how the water goes.
The creek's come to flood stage and dropped 3 times now. By 10 o'clock tonight, there's been only scattered damage. Worried neighbors watch, wait, and hope. I'm Carl Sonkin, News Center 4.
It seems the more remote a Bay Area town, the greater its problems with this storm. In the steep valleys of the Santa Cruz Mountains, mudslides and washouts can easily isolate hamlets and homes. News Center 4's Kim Peterson has visited some of the hardest hit areas tonight. He's live now at the summit in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Kim.
Well, Sylvia, the power's still knocked out to as many as 3,000 people in Santa Cruz County, and just as soon as the crews and even some private contractors helping get it back on again, another tree is knocked over, knocking down another power line, and they start all over once again. The other major problem here tonight is those mudslides that suddenly tumble onto the roadways.
Till Friday. Understand that, you know, so there's all kinds of things going to come down.
There are too many mudslides to count. Work crews along this stretch of Highway 9 cleaned up half a dozen, one after another, within a few hundred yards of each other. The water is gushing out of the hills, washing away driveways and streets and a few sandbags. But most residents are not yet afraid to leave.
It's not too bad. It's been like this before. If it keeps up for like a couple more days, it should be getting a little bit hectic. A few trees down here and there.
Would you evacuate, or are you going to stick it out?
Oh, I'll probably stick it out. Where else is there to go?
I know. I can't even get home tonight.
Aldecroft Heights residents spent part of today watching geologists check the soil, and there is a voluntary evacuation there tonight. Some of the other major problems include places like Eureka Canyon Road, where a woman has been trapped there for hours, but rescue crews can't get to her either from above or below her. Then they'll apparently have to wait until the weather clears, if that's even possible. Secondly, down near Watsonville, there's a lake there on Highway 152, and it's overflowing its banks now, and there is a mandatory evacuation in Watsonville along the lake on Route 152. Also, the people tell us now, because of the steady rains predicted for several days to come, it will get a lot worse here before it gets any better. Sylvia and Jim?
Thanks, Kim. You and your crew take care tonight, too. Reporting live from Santa Cruz County, Kim Peterson.
There have also been flood warnings and evacuations the length of the Sacramento River tonight, from Tehama County up north all the way to the Delta. In the town of Tehama, deputies asked people to evacuate 3 mobile home parks along the river. The sheriff's department says most of the people simply refused to leave, preferring instead to ride out the storm in their homes. The storm has dumped several feet of new snow on the Sierra and closed parts of Highways 80 and 50 with mudslides, high water, and fallen trees. A massive rock slide has blocked an Amtrak train with 600 people on board. They'll have to wait it out while crews clear the tracks. The Truckee River is expected to bring heavy flooding to low-lying areas, and residents in the High Sierra have been warned to prepare for the worst. Mudslides also a major problem along Highway 1 on the peninsula tonight, and no surprise, the main trouble spot, Devil's Slide. Highway 1 has been closed at Pacifica tonight because of a big rock and mudslide north of Half Moon Bay. No word yet on when the slide will be cleared. Highway 92, the alternate route to Half Moon Bay, has also been hit by mudslides. It's open in both directions now, but be prepared for delays. Mudslides and floods have closed dozens of California roads and highways. All state roads into Napa County are closed tonight. All county roads in Solano County have been shut down by flooding. Highway 1 is closed near Muir Beach, and Highway 101 is closed at the Marin and Sonoma County line. In the South Bay, Highway 9 between Santa Cruz and Felton is closed, as is Highway 129 near Watsonville. And if you're planning on doing any traveling tonight or tomorrow, call ahead for road conditions. Sylvia?
If you plan to take public transportation to work tomorrow, you should be in good shape. We've just checked, and so far all train and bus services from the South Bay to the North Bay intend to maintain normal service, and they hope to run on schedule. The situation's not so good for Bay Area school children. Dozens of schools will be closed tomorrow because of the weather. Here's a look at some of the affected districts. All are in the North Bay so far, but by morning the situation could get worse and more schools could be closed. If you're not sure if your school is closed, your best bet is to call the school in the morning or listen for closings on the radio.
And as this weather system bears down on our Bay Area, we're starting to look back into history to see that this could be one of the worst floods we've had in a long time.
It's interesting. We were talking in terms of 81, 82 initially, then 82, 83. Very, very tough winters that we all remember. Then maybe a winter that not as many remember, 1964. And then 1955, as the rains got worse. This, interesting, I think, the front page from the San Francisco News at that time. This comes to us from Mike Peckner, who runs a organization called Golden West Meteorology, a lot of old weather records there. You can see that was one of the situations we were talking about. And this from 1964, when they were also looking back, another 1955 flood seen in the Empire storm pattern. Then they were looking back to 1955. In any case, I think we are looking at a very serious weather situation, as you know. But tonight, I may have the first bright word about the entire situation, and you don't have to wait long to find it. I'll give you details on that in just a moment. First, flash flood warning is posted until 9 o'clock for every county in Northern California except Alturas and Modoc, that's up in northeastern California, of course, and San Francisco. Now, there's also a winter storm warning posted for tonight. That's for high winds and for heavy rains. It is raining now over the summit. But once the cold front moves through, much colder air in behind it will make that rain turn to snow. And now, finally, some very impressive rainfall totals. This is for the entire storm. 5 1/4 inches of rain in San Francisco, 3 1/4, a bit in excess of 3 1/4 at San Jose, close to 4 1/2 inches on the peninsula. That's since Friday for the entire storm, a little over 4 inches at Livermore. Meanwhile, in the North Bay, which, as you know, has borne the brunt of much of these storm systems, over 10 inches at Novato, 11 1/2 inches San Rafael, but 9 1/3 inches at Santa Rosa, over 8 inches at Petaluma. They've had a couple of hours of partial clearing there, that is at least a let-up. And look at Napa, 17 14/100 inches of rain, Moraga close to 10 1/2. I want to take you back to Saturday night at 11 o'clock and watch as subtropical moisture begins streaming up into the Bay Area. It is being met by cold air to the north. It's really a convergence of two different jet streams, the subtropical jet and the polar jet. But in any case, now the good news. What do you see developing here? A little tongue of clearing. And if we're lucky, we will see some of that clearing for tomorrow. Colder air coming in, again, the warm subtropical air, and they converge right on California. But quickly, I want to show you radar showing a lot of the shower activity statewide, and this is that tongue of clearing. And if we're lucky, we may see a let-up by tomorrow afternoon. That would be temporary only. I want to emphasize that, but at least it would help some of those waters recede. Wind-driven rain later tonight, winds in excess of 60 miles an hour. Lows will be in the upper 40s and low 50s. Tomorrow, rain and wind will be heavy at times, but possibly in the afternoon, we could see a let-up as that tongue of clearing makes its way over California. Windy with rain and snow in the high Sierra. The snow level should lower after the next cold front passes, which will be overnight, to 6,000 feet. I do see rain, however, on and off through the end of the week. Perhaps, though, if we're lucky, a bit of a let-up tomorrow afternoon.
City of Napa in the floodplain off the Napa River. These people still coping with flooded homes and cars and furniture and possessions. Neighbors did get together, though, and they used boats to help each other get to and from their homes. Some people wanted to get back just to check on their possessions. Other people faced mud and water damage, and we're going to be seeing a lot of these types of scenes over the next few weeks. Cleanup, that's the day after. Lifelong residents...
We've been here 23 years, and this is the worst it's been. It got up into the driveway, but so far we've been lucky. It hasn't come into the house. And
you say so far?
Yeah, so far. We're going to sweat tonight out.
Well, a lot of people are going to be sweating tonight out. In fact, there is a big meeting at 1 o'clock of Napa City and County officials going to be talking about when the decision can be made to let people back into their homes. That's the situation from here. Reporting live from Napa, I'm Hank Plant. David, back to you.
Hank, I had one question for you real fast. Do you know if it's the tide that affects that water? Now that the tide's out, maybe that's allowed the river to drop just a little bit.
It is indeed the tide. There is another high tide coming later on this afternoon and then tomorrow morning, but it's the tide and the combination of rain. You can see the floodplain behind me. That's supposed to be just a little piece of river down there, but everything you see behind me is flooded.
Okay, thanks very much, Hank, for standing by. Of course, Hank will have more tonight at 6 o'clock. And Hank, of course, been running into the National Guard up there, out in the areas around Napa. They are still helping to sandbag in the hills and keep them from slipping in and around the town of Napa. The Russian River floodwaters have reached a record level of 49 feet today, isolating the entire town of Guerneville. Hundreds of people are stranded there. Many of them have made it to a church where they are waiting to be airlifted or taken by boat to safety. The problem is the river is so swollen, there's very little dry landing space available even for the helicopters, and the bridges are making the river completely impassable. More heavy rain is expected in Sonoma County a little bit later on today. The storm has made driving nearly impossible in some parts of the Bay Area because of flooding and mudslides. In the South Bay, highways 152, 129, 25, and 9 are all closed. Highway 1 is closed at Big Sur only. Interstate 80 is closed eastbound at American Canyon Road. Westbound, it is closed in Fairfield. Highway 680 is closed northbound at the Benicia Bridge. Southbound, that road is open. Highway 101 is closed in both directions between Gilroy and San Juan Bautista right now. 101 also closed north of Healdsburg. Up in the North Bay, Highway 128 closed at the Sonoma-Napa border, and Highway 12 is closed from Santa Rosa to Sonoma. Highway 1 is closed at Stinson Beach at Panoramic Highway and near Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. The wet weather has triggered more mudslides in Marin County overnight. This is just adding to the flooding problems they've already had up there. Jim Bunn is standing by right now live near 101 in Corte Madera, keeping an eye on the water levels up in Marin. Jim?
Well, David, there is some good news. As Hank mentioned, there has been very little rain this morning. In fact, the sun's beginning to peek out a little bit here in Marin. The Corte Madera Creek here, which has caused the bulk of the flooding problems here in Marin County, is down now. It's just about 2.5 hours away from dead low tide. They are expecting another high tide about 8 o'clock tonight. But while the water level has come down here, so have some of the hillsides in Marin County. Throughout the night and early morning hours, emergency crews have struggled with 3 mudslides on the same road. The most devastating, a wall of mud that took out trees and a major power line. It happened as one PG&E lineman was working on another slide just down the street.
I was opening up a 12 kV switch up there in the hillside giveaway about 100 yards above me, and the mud and stuff come down. I got in my truck and got out just as a wake of mud come through there, and it was too close.
Even though most of this hill has already come down, there still may be problems up above. Way up top through the trees there, you can see there is a house. Only now there's not much of a hill left to support it. This is the view from above, from that house. You can see how close the slide is to it. Although the house is empty, on the deck, just a few feet from this mudslide, is a swimming pool filled with water.
For years we've known that if that hill comes down, that we might get a chunk of it right through the house.
I suppose that's still a possibility.
Yeah, I think it's less of a possibility now.
Jerry Warren lives a few yards below all of this. The slide last night was so loud it woke him up.
My wife was down in the house. I was asleep. I heard it when it probably hit the middle of the street. She said it sounded like a bunch of heavy trucks going over the road, which was probably the top part of the slide when that was going on. Trees breaking loose and twisting each other up. But I don't worry a bunch about it, though.
I guess you can't.
No, not in sleep at night.
Now, in all, there are roughly half a dozen mudslides that are currently being worked here in Marin County. Obviously, there have been more since the storm began last week, but right now road crews and emergency crews are working on about a half dozen of them. None of those involve any injuries or any damage to any homes or threatening homes other than the one that we saw just a moment ago. Reporting live in Corte Madera, I'm Jim Bunn. David, back to you.
And Jim, as you and I saw last night, that creek was raging through Ross last night. Has that dropped down a little bit, upstream a little ways?
Yeah, the entire creek of Corte Madera Creek is down a little bit. And as I said, the low tide will be dead low at 2:30. They expect about 8 o'clock tonight they'll be back to a high tide. So if we get more rain this afternoon, it may be a problem again.
Okay, thanks very much, Jim. Tough work up there. Those guys have been up there all night. We'll look forward to more tonight on Eyewitness News at 6 o'clock. The storm is keeping a lot of kids out of school, as you can imagine today, in many parts of the hardest hit counties around the Bay Area. In Marin County, most school districts are closed today because of flooding and mudslides, including both campuses of the College of Marin. In Sonoma County, most schools are closed except Santa Rosa Junior College and Sonoma State University. All schools in the Napa area are, of course, closed today. In Santa Cruz, all schools should be open today except San Lorenzo Valley District there. And in Solano County, all schools are closed except Vacaville and Vallejo. Most of these schools are closed on a day-to-day basis, and there's no word yet on which ones will be open tomorrow. Our rainstorms here in the Bay Area have become huge snowstorms up in the Sierra. 8 feet of new snow fell in the mountains, causing avalanche warnings for the eastern slopes. Right now, it's nearly impossible to get in or out of the Tahoe area. Interstate 80 is expected to be blocked for up to a week because of a huge rock slide, and highways 50 and 395 are both closed because of slides and flooding. Reno has been declared an emergency area because of the flooding on the Truckee River, and near Yosemite, an avalanche crushed 12 homes at the June Lake Ski Resort. One person is still missing because of that avalanche near Yosemite. Southern California had its share of the big storms too. Waves surging to 20 feet at some beaches there. Didn't keep the surfers away though. One surfer was killed in Hermosa Beach. Several boats were destroyed by the storm, and mud and rock slides hit many of the coastal and canyon areas. More slides are expected today as those storms continue. And Joel Bartlett is standing by with word on what new surprises the storm may bring us later on today. Joel?
Well, Dave, as we've seen, we are experiencing a lull right now, but unfortunately it is just a lull. As we look at Skyscan 5 here, you'll be able to notice that clouds extend well down to the southwest, over 1,000 miles or so. The flow is from that direction. That means more rain is coming this way. The next surge, the way I see it right now, it's very difficult to tell exactly, but I would think around 3 or 4 o'clock this afternoon we'll see some locally heavy rain. It'll continue into tonight. More showery weather tomorrow, but there's still lots of moisture out there coming in later on in the week. So unfortunately, it's not over yet. From the Weather Office, I'm Joel Bartlett. Dave, back to you.
For rivers to level off, for the damage to be assessed, and for everyone to take a deep breath. Good evening. Mark Thompson says we only have an hour or more of this really wet stuff to go, but earlier today it didn't last long, that clearing. By mid-afternoon, the rain was once again relentlessly pounding our rooftops, and tonight it's supposed to get even heavier. The worst storm in 3 decades has claimed at least 11 lives so far, and if floods and mudslides weren't enough, there are new dangers tonight. Dams around Northern California are threatening tonight to give way. It's happened already on the American River east of Sacramento. A temporary dam partially collapsed this afternoon, sending millions of gallons of water into the Folsom Reservoir, which is already at capacity. Levees that protect the city of Sacramento from the American are being patrolled tonight. About 20,000 homes would be flooded if those levees collapsed.
The rising waters are also causing concern in the South Bay tonight. 8 of 11 Santa Clara County reservoirs have swelled beyond their limits, and they are spilling over into neighboring creeks tonight. One of them is the Lexington Reservoir near Los Gatos. That's where News Center 4's Wilson Van Alst is standing by with a live report. Van, what kind of danger are we talking about tonight?
Well, Jim, I've got to tell you that beyond their limits is kind of a tricky phrase here. These reservoirs are at capacity, but they are not full. And I know that sounds like a lot of doublespeak, but let me explain. I am standing right now on top of one of the dams, the dam at Lexington Reservoir, but down below me is the water level. The water level that this reservoir is expected to contain is far below the level of the dam, and this is the spillway that is carrying the water away from the reservoir in a controlled way so that it never, in fact, or create any danger to the structure of that dam. The big question is what happens when this water gets down on the floor of the Santa Clara Valley, down into San Jose, for example. What I'm being told by weather officials and by flood control officials in San Jose right now is that even at the worst prediction for this storm, it will not cause any kind of massive flooding within the Santa Clara Valley, not in the city of San Jose at any rate. That is not to minimize the danger from flash flooding, however, or from mudslides. And we'd like to show you some pictures of one of the slides that happened earlier today just above the Lexington Reservoir. And these pictures show an area where an entire hillside, thousands of tons of mud, caved away and in fact destroyed 2 houses. One of those homes at the time was occupied, and almost miraculously, the 2 people inside were not hurt in all of that. Again, there is a great danger from mudslides and from flash flooding in the South Bay, but I don't think it's fair to say at this point, and from any predictable standpoint on this storm, that we have dangers of dams giving away down here, at least according to flood control officials that I've talked to so far.
Okay, thank you very much. Wilson Van Alst reporting live tonight from the Lexington Reservoir in Santa Clara County.
Pretty good news indeed. In Vallejo tonight, more than 1,000 people have been evacuated from neighborhoods below the Lake Chabot Dam. Right now, the evacuations are a precautionary measure, and they are limited to the northwest end of Vallejo. But the Office of Emergency Services says the lake is getting a lot of runoff tonight, and they want people away from the dam. But by far the worst flooding is along the Russian River tonight, where evacuations have been the order of the day. The towns of Monterey and Guerneville have been completely isolated since last night. And as News Center 4's Lila Peterson reports today, it took the Army to get the refugees to higher ground.
By dusk, 500 people had been airlifted out of Guerneville. They were flown out by the Army and Air National Guard. Some of the pilots have flown in Vietnam, and as long as they had any light, they kept flying. Wet and tired search and rescue teams flew back to Santa Rosa late tonight. They spent 36 hours pulling people out of the water and off roofs.
As the news media broadcast earlier, people that needed help put a white sheet out and wave a white sheet. So we were flying around looking for people out in the outlying areas around Guerneville, looking for the white sheets, and we got flagged down by quite a few.
The town of Guerneville was buried by the Russian River. It crested at a record high of 49.5 feet. Late today, an Army chopper did manage to get a generator in for electricity. The people who were evacuated came here to the Santa Rosa Veterans Auditorium. For the people who weren't lucky enough to get out tonight, food and medical supplies were dropped to them in Guerneville. One man said he barely got out alive.
I was laying in the living room, and I heard this crack, and then got knocked off the couch, and I was on the floor. And then I heard a bunch of more cracks, and as I went to run for the door, man, there's trees coming down off the hill.
He lost everything, and so did another man who got out from Monte Vista.
My whole house is gone, and I lost everything.
Tomorrow morning, with the first light, the choppers will begin evacuating again. In Santa Rosa, Lila Peterson, News Center 4.
Today, the governor declared states of emergency in Napa, Sonoma, and Humboldt counties. President Reagan is expected to declare those same counties disaster areas tomorrow, making them eligible for federal relief funds. With the return of the rain tonight, Napa County faces the threat of even more flooding. Both the Russian and Napa rivers were over their banks today, forcing thousands of people out of their homes. News Center 4's Vic Lee is in Napa. Let's go to him live now with our News Star 4 satellite. Vic, what is happening there now?
Well, Sylvia, the rains died down about a half hour ago, but it was raining heavily throughout most of the evening. There is new flooding reported in areas which escaped it yesterday, and firemen and policemen have begun evacuating about a dozen locations here in Napa. This is one of them, the so-called Lake Park neighborhood. And firemen have been here all evening trying to save this neighborhood of about 300 homes. You can still see a lot of action here. Firemen, crews, and they've left these spare sandbags for the people here in case they need them. Here's what it looked like earlier today. Take a look. A generator was brought in to pump out the water from the flooded areas. Yesterday, a nearby levee overfilled, submerging half the neighborhood. The threat tonight is that the levee itself will break. Emergency crews began sandbagging homes which escaped the flooding yesterday. By nightfall, more crews, more equipment arrived. Their task, to save this tiny neighborhood. The residents who stayed, whose homes had not flooded, took all of this good-naturedly.
I was afraid last night, kind of panicky, but today I'm kind of calmed down. I'm not worried about anything now.
In the absence of electricity, Tom and Angie Piper were preparing a candlelight dinner cooked on a Coleman stove. They seemed oblivious to all the excitement outside.
I'm not really too worried about it coming in the house. May come in the garage, but everything is up in the garage.
But by 8 tonight, authorities were talking evacuation. Police began going door to door, only to find that most had already left on their own. There are still residents who are spending the night here, but the fire chief tells me that they do so at their own risk. Sylvia?
Thank you, Vic, and I must say it's very nice to see you relatively dry for the first time in several reports. And Mark says that maybe the worst is over and you'll be able to get home to your family finally tomorrow night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In Pacifica, a number of residents evacuated there today. Officials fearful the wet hillsides behind homes might slide. And as News Center 4's Carl Sonkin reports tonight, mudslides evoke controversy in Pacifica.
It's not like owning a home. A home should be a safe place.
Since yesterday, she's kept all her clothes in her cars, parked them outside the garage, and waited.
I spent the night awake watching my backyard.
Every time there's a big rain, it comes down.
But this slide wrecked his back fence, filled his swimming pool and that of his neighbors with mud, and left his family fearful again.
Starting all over from 82.
Neighbors are still leaving 4 homes tonight after firemen yesterday came by and told them to get out.
Well, they came by, and then they asked us, you should evacuate.
Well, despite what I saw and heard here tonight on Big Bend Way, Pacifica city officials insist there were no evacuations in this town.
We could actually order evacuations, but I want to emphasize we have not done that yet.
The city manager told me that the residents of 16 homes had only been advised by this letter that the hillsides in back might be in danger of sliding in case of more rain. After a tragic mudslide that killed 3 children here 4 years ago, Pacifica officials have been wary of the sliding hills. Engineers keep an eye on them.
No houses have slipped, no houses have been impacted by earth moving into the houses or the rear yards.
It's my mud pool.
But the city manager apparently hadn't talked to the folk on Big Bend, like Susan Dugan.
We can't live like this anymore. I mean, I thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown yesterday. I was going crazy.
And the hills are still sliding, and more rain's on the way. In Pacifica, I'm Carl Sonkin, News Center 4.
Well, Mark, it's been one long week of this stuff. Are we finally going to get a respite?
Yeah, and listen, you think about it, it's very early in the week, but I think so. Boy, things are changing by the hour. As you know, I'm getting a different satellite picture every hour and updating the forecast accordingly. I think we've really got a firm handle on what's going to happen, though, and I want to share it with you in just a moment. First, I must tell you, there is a high wind warning tonight for winds up to 60 miles an hour around the Bay Area, and a flash flood warning for every county around the Bay Area, with the exception of San Francisco, and a flash flood watch for everyone around Northern California. If you can see this television program, there's a flash flood watch in your county. So, watch things closely, but I think the next couple of hours will be critical as things begin to change for the better. since 4 o'clock today. This is a 6-hour rainfall total, almost 3/4 of an inch in San Francisco, almost a ½ inch in Oakland, San Jose at 7/10, Santa Rosa way up at almost 1.5 inches, over an inch on the peninsula at Redwood City, at SFO a little over a ½ inch. Also in Napa, look at this, 2.5 inches in 6 hours. Vallejo completing their wettest February ever with 2 12/100 inches. Petaluma a little over 2 1/4 inches, and Mountain View a little over an inch. Norden is getting heavy snow now, 6 inches of new snow. These are rainfall totals for the entire storm since Thursday. Pick out the spot of most interest to you, but I'll note Pacifica over 10 inches, 15 inches at Santa Cruz, over 8.5 inches at Morgan Hill in the South Bay, 14.5 inches plus at San Rafael, 8 inches Petaluma, 12.5 inches Santa Rosa, and over 20 inches of rain since Thursday at Napa. All right, since 11 o'clock last night, watch as we had a little lull in the action. You saw that tongue of clearing earlier today, and then the track established itself from the southwest once again. We get the heavy rains again today, and now we're just seeing the back edge of this front offshore. That's very good news. As you know, this is a battle between this warm subtropical flow, and we're finally seeing the tail of it. We haven't seen that in many, many days, and this polar jet stream. Finally, the polar jet stream seems to be winning the battle that will suppress this subtropical jet, and this high pressure will build to help pinch it off as well. So I think the good news is another hour or so of very heavy rains as this continues just offshore. You can see in our next satellite picture. I'm looking at some clearing in behind it, but all of this is thunder shower activity. I'd look for thunder showers to be rather numerous both tonight and tomorrow as all of this pivots in. But the heaviest rain associated with this entire storm scenario the last 6 days has now moved through the Bay Area, and after the next hour or so, we should be out of the woods on that. Still, I'd look for wind-driven rain to continue off and on through the night, and thunder showers. Lows should be in the 40s and 50s. Tomorrow, intermittent showers and those thunderstorms will continue to be a part of the picture. Highs should be in the 50s and 60s. In the High Sierra, heavy snow and it's windy, and the snow level has now dropped down to 6,000 feet. Highs tomorrow should be in the 30s. A winter storm warning up there. And aside from the thunder showers, which will be intermittent, and some scattered showers, things are actually improving. And I'm looking for basically a drying pattern with just rather unsettled weather through a portion of the weekend.
Well, hopefully no surprises in those thunderstorms.
This is, it can oftentimes leave a lot of water in a short time, but let's hope they're isolated.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mark.
The troubles created by the storm aren't limited to non-city folks. The city dwellers in San Francisco have their own problems with flooding and mudslides, as News Center 4's Kim Peterson reports.
They used to have a house with a beautiful backyard, but their home on Potrero Hill is almost under Potrero Hill.
It looks pretty scary when you see all that rock and the trees and things that could come down on a house.
The muck has been tumbling all day, crushing the backyard fence into splinters and exposing a gas pipeline that PG&E had to bypass before it snapped. But Ray Gamundi says the Public Works Department was less helpful.
It took them hours to get here, and then when they did, they said it's not our problem. It's city property, but it's unimproved. So it's your problem.
Now Gamundi has a ton of extra backyard he can't get rid of and is afraid even more will fall before the rain stops.
This is one of the biggest problems for low-lying areas throughout San Francisco. Sudden pools of water swamping streets and parking lots. Very common when overloaded storm drains become just too clogged.
We sort of put this contraption together to try to funnel as much of the water off the lot as we can.
Of course, now you're pushing it down the street.
Exactly. I hope nobody gets mad at us for doing that, right?
But once the drains were open, the problem was solved, at least until tomorrow. In San Francisco, Kim Peterson, News Center 4.
Geez, what a mess everywhere. And, of course, it's far from over tonight for us and for the people east of us. You'll see what the storm is doing to the mountains and much more as Update continues tonight. Down the Bay Area's swollen rivers farther east, the effects are just as bad, if not worse. In Sacramento, there was severe flooding in several locations today. Wranglers had to use boats to rescue horses flooded out of their stalls at the state fairgrounds. Higher up, heavy snows and rampaging mudslides have closed both Interstate 80 and Highway 50, bringing ski trips to a premature halt. Across the state line, the biggest little city in the world, Reno, is endangered by the rain-swollen Truckee River. The casinos were spared, but flooding forced the evacuation of several nearby areas. Schools and some major roads remain closed tonight. Nevada Governor Richard Bryan has declared a state of emergency in 4 western counties. And in Colorado's high country, 5 feet of snow has fallen in the last 6 days. In the last 3 days alone, authorities have reported over 400 avalanches. One of those slides blocked the only road to the Powder Mountain Ski Resort, stranding hundreds of people. They walked over the slide to safety. Avalanche warnings have been posted in many areas of the Rockies, including Sun Valley, Idaho.
The news center for Northern California. This is Live at 5.
The water is coming at Tyler Island from every direction tonight over the battered levees and from the sky. Good evening. It's 5 o'clock in San Francisco. I'm Bob Jimenez, and a new threat tonight is in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. 3 levees crumbled today, flooding 9,300 acres of farmland. More than 100 people had to be evacuated. And the problems aren't limited to those islands. Our John Fulmer is in the Delta town of Rio Vista tonight, where levees hopefully are still holding back the Sacramento River. John, what can we expect later tonight in the Delta?
Well, you know, Bob, every storm that goes through the Bay Area is a double-edged sword for the Delta, for the folks out here in the Delta. They get the rain going out, they get the runoff coming back, and that combined with high tides is causing what you see here behind me. That natural gas well is underwater. Not usually. That doesn't usually happen. The homes in the background back there, they're getting wet, clear up to the front doorsteps. This is a parking lot outside or next to City Hall, and over there you do see City Hall. And the only thing that kept it dry today is that wall of sandbags back there. And earlier today, the water was up within about a foot of the top of that. City Hall did manage to stay dry, but some other folks weren't so lucky, as you're going to see in this videotape. Water went right over the top of the levees around Vieira Resort. About 100 people live out there full-time on that island, and they didn't get much warning. One minute they say they were high and dry. The next they say they had water pouring into their homes and trailers. Most of them have moved into a temporary shelter in the auditorium of Rio Vista High School. Red Cross is providing food and sleeping bags for them. Now, Rio Vista did not escape altogether. Some very exclusive waterfront property on Edgewater Drive, the homes we just showed you back here in the background, is getting soaked, and they tell me all this will probably get worse tomorrow. Now, they don't expect any problems tonight because the tide is down. They say about 11 o'clock tomorrow, the tide will be up 7 inches higher than it was today. That's what is predicted. And if that happens, that water could be right at the top of those sandbags, maybe going over the top. So the city is going to have crews standing by to evacuate City Hall if necessary, Bob.
All right, we can't avoid the tide, but it might stop raining, at least for a couple of days, we understand. How is that going to affect the situation there, John?
Well, it's going to help the situation, Bob, but again, the problem right now is coming back at them from the Sierra, runoff and high tides.
All right, thank you. John Fulmer in the Delta tonight. Governor George Deukmejian flew over the flood-devastated areas to see the damage for himself today. This is what he saw. He seems to be bringing, well, some hope of better times with him. As soon as he landed in Santa Rosa, the skies cleared and people saw a rainbow. Governor has already declared Sonoma, Napa, and Humboldt counties emergency areas. So far, as we've been telling you, the hardest hit areas, of course, are the North Bay, a lot of flooding. For more, here's Evan White, News Star 4 Control.
Lord, are they glad to see a break in the rain. Finally, the Napa River able to recede, or begin to recede at least a little for the moment. The worst weather over for the people there. Using our exclusive News Star 4 satellite, we're going live to Napa County. Vic Lee's our reporter on that scene, has been all week long. Vic, let me ask you, first of all, the water may be receding, and you're in a home. I guess people are getting back in. I would think that isn't the best time for these folks going in and finding what you're standing in the middle of.
No, it's been a very sad thing for most of the people, especially the people in this neighborhood. This is a home of Ralph and Mary Braun. Now, they've lived here for about 23 years, and never before have they been flooded. Now, the water's finally receded enough, and they came home today for the first time. Take a walk with me through the house, and I'll show you what they saw. First thing they saw, probably, was this water line. This is how high the water came, Evan. 3 feet. This house was flooded 3 feet. Now, they managed to save a phonograph, 2 chairs, but the rest of their furniture is completely gone. The sofa, the carpeting is soaked with mud and water. That's got to be thrown out. And the hardwood floors have buckled under, so that's got to be ripped out. And Evan, unfortunately, like most of the people I talked to here, they had no flood insurance. In fact, for the Brauns, they had flood insurance for many, many years, but just this year, as fate would have it, they tossed it out and bought, of all things, earthquake insurance.
I don't suppose there's anything worse than, well, water damage, maybe smoke damage, but water damage is terrible. What about the business community? I understood 7,000 people were affected up there in Napa. Businesses hit?
That's correct, Evan. In fact, we have some videotape of the merchants cleaning up. About 70 to 80% of the businesses have been damaged in one way or another by the flooding. And I believe you're seeing pictures of a health food store. Now, this is the oldest health food store in Napa. They've been in business for some 30 years. $40,000 worth of vitamins gone, and they're going out of business. We'll have more on their story on the 6th.
So the best help for folks will be any relief they get from the government if and when that comes along, I suppose. All right.
That's correct.
Thank you, Vic Lee, reporting from Napa for us. Bob?
Thank you, Vic. Meanwhile, in the neighboring Sonoma County, the swollen Russian River is slowly retreating. However, it leaves a lot of devastation in its wake. Take a look. Rooftops were about all that was visible today to remind people there was once a thriving community of homes and businesses here before the rain came. One Guerneville resident simply says there is no town left. Hundreds of people have been evacuated from this section of Sonoma County, and we understand now that the National Guard is allowing some residents in, but they have to be in four-wheel drive vehicles. Our Lila Peterson got close to the devastation today. Lila, what did you see?
Well, that's a good way to put it, Bob. Devastation. There's a helicopter coming in now behind me, one of the last flights of the day of the National Guard, bringing more people, and they've evacuated about 1,400 in all. We did manage to get in today. We got in on our own because we had a hard time getting in with the National Guard's help. They were restricting the media. We flew in, and here are some of the pictures that we took today from Guerneville when we hit the ground. As you can see, the city is still full of water. The people in Vic's report, at least they were able to get back to their homes because most of the folks in Guerneville can't get back to their houses yet, the people who were flooded out. A lot of the people, look at this Safeway. This thing was supposed to be flood-proof, but some people in town said it was built 6 feet lower than they had planned, and it obviously was flooded out just like all the other places in Guerneville. And people now are just beginning to try and clean out. They're pushing mud, water out of the stores in downtown Guerneville, but an awful lot of that town is still underwater. Bob?
Okay, where are a lot of these residents staying tonight, Lila, and what are they being told about the possibility of going back?
Well, they're still staying at the shelter, the Veterans Memorial Auditorium in Santa Rosa. If they have four-wheel drives, they can go back in tonight. If they don't, they've got to stay out for a little while longer. A lot of the roads are still impassable. It's real iffy. If the rain comes again, obviously, that'll mean more roads are closed off again. Bob?
All right, Lila Peterson in Sonoma County tonight. Also, the threat of mudslides is the big problem still facing people in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Back to Evan.
2 homes so far lost to those mudslides you're talking about, Bob, in Santa Cruz. Several major highways still closed down there by mudslides. Highway 17, one of the hardest hit right now. That's where our Chuck Coppola is. Chuck, just how bad where you are?
Literally hardest hit. Right now it's hailing in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Behind me, though, you see southbound lanes of 17 flowing very smoothly. Let's go right to the videotape and show you what it looked like earlier, just about 2 or 3 miles down the road. A massive mudslide. It happened around 2 in the morning, an avalanche of mud and trees crashing across southbound 17. It closed it for more than 12 hours, shoving a driver in a small pickup truck up against the center divide, but we understand he's okay. His name, Dan Copeland. He lives in Capitola. He's all right. The Felton Covered Bridge, though, that old structure, 94 years old, not so lucky. A big sycamore tree crashed down upon that, the corner of it, around 5 a.m. And yesterday we showed you pictures of a home near... Yesterday we showed you pictures of a home near the Lexington Reservoir, very close to disaster, falling down a mudslide. 2 feet of earth moved away. That home is still inching closer and closer. Bob, Evan?
Let me ask you something, Chuck. I was going to say, now that the rain stopped, obviously you're in the middle of hail, which you have my deepest sympathy. When this does stop, does that mean the ground stabilizes fairly quickly, or does the threat of slides continue long after the rain cease?
It continues to maintain that. Let me show you. Look down here. This is exactly the kind of stuff that the Santa Cruz Mountains looks like all over the place. It is absolutely no wonder that there was such a massive slide, so that even though today it was fairly light rain for much of the day, only now did it start coming down in buckets. Even though they had that little reprieve, they're still very, very concerned and will be for the next week or so.
It makes sense, and I can see why. Thank you, Chuck Coppola from Santa Cruz Mountains. Bob, it's time of...
All right, let's talk with the man that knows, Mark Thompson, over at the Weather Board, to tell us what he was looking at today. Mark?
Well, last night at this time, this was the picture I showed you. I said that I thought could take hope in the fact that this system looked like it was clearing to the east, but that the worst would indeed come that night. That was last night into the first part of today. Well, that's more or less what happened here. And then I want you to watch this as it clears off to the east. Cold, unstable air following it in. This is the front itself trailing off. Polar jet stream now has moved to the north. The weak remnants of the subtropical jet stream is now being depressed to the south. The weather front that passed and the high pressure that's beginning to ease its way in. That's a good sign. Bottom line, though, is this. We still have to contend with all that cold, unstable air behind this system. That means scattered showers. It also means some areas of thunderstorms. Could see some funnel clouds, indeed, for the first part of tomorrow. So I'd still look for areas of heavy showers both overnight and into tomorrow, but those areas are going to become more and more widely scattered through the course of the night. Here are some rainfall totals for the last 24 hours, ending at 4 o'clock. 0.8 of an inch of rain at San Francisco. Oakland, close to 3/4 of an inch. San Jose, over 1 inch of rain the last day. Over 2 inches in the North Bay area. Santa Rosa, Concord with more than 2 inches. San Rafael with 2 3/4 inches. And at SFO, a little over 1.5 inches. Scattered thunder showers will continue tonight, and scattered showers as well, 40s and 50s. And then tomorrow, scattered showers and thunderstorms continue likely, but again, they become progressively more widely scattered, and we should get into a drying trend. In about 7 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight, even as the waters recede in Napa and Sonoma counties, the warnings have gone up in yet another part of this state. Again, the story is one of flooding and evacuation. This time, it's the rugged country north of Sacramento. Some 200 people are said to be isolated by road cave-ins and mudslides in the Feather River Canyon. Heavy rain and snow have turned the Feather River into a destructive torrent. News Center 4's Wilson Van Alst is on the banks of the Feather River tonight. We switch to him live via News Star 4 satellite. Van?
Well, Jim, we are sufficiently downstream right now where the river is wide. It is flowing. It is obviously swollen, but flowing rather smoothly here, not the torrent that it is in the narrow parts upstream. The number of people estimated stranded earlier today ran at 600, but the weather began to clear in the southern end of the Feather River Canyon, and rescue workers were able to get in from the north. They were able to evacuate 400 of those 600 people, and they say they talked to almost all of the rest of them. Those people decided to stay behind and weather the storm. A little bit earlier this evening, we went up as far into the Feather River Canyon as Mother Nature would allow.
Well, I think a lot of the people didn't realize what was happening. You know, like a lot of guys thought that the water wouldn't come as high as it did.
Bob Hayes, the local guy who got us into the danger zone. He has lived here all his life and never seen it like this.
A lot of slides.
How many did you hear?
I heard 41 at one time.
In the Feather River Canyon, construction crews had given up on trying to make things better. They were simply fighting to keep things from getting worse.
Well, it's rough up there, I'm going to tell you. The highway's gone. Completely gone.
You just had to retreat back and just get away from the river.
Even so, Caltrans worker Jim Giles was himself trapped for 3 days when the road washed out behind him and his crew.
Eating out the roadway, and the roadways were falling, and the buildings were going down the river, and the bridges were disappearing. And it was scary.
And those are people, Jim, who would say the 200 people who decided not to take advantage of the emergency service evacuation are very foolish tonight. They say the danger still exists in that canyon.
Okay, thank you very much. Wilson Van Alst reporting live tonight from the banks of the Feather River via News Star 4. Sylvia?
The Feather River is contributing to some very big flooding problems in the Delta tonight. That's because the Feather feeds into Lake Oroville, part of an elaborate flood control system aimed at minimizing flooding at times like these. Excess water from the Oroville eventually reaches the Sacramento River, which in turn drains into the Delta. But in this case, even the Delta, an area the size of Rhode Island, cannot handle all the runoff. The area around Walnut Grove between Sacramento and Stockton has been hit the hardest, with the McCollum River breaching levees to the east and the Sacramento River pouring in from the west. Some 10,000 acres have been inundated with muddy water. 200 people have been evacuated, but if the remaining levees hold, no new flooding is expected. Runoffs and high tides are threatening to bring even bigger floods to the Delta area downriver from Sacramento. Hundreds of people have already been evacuated from low-lying islands. And as News Center 4's John Fulmer reports tonight, there may be more evacuations to come.
City Hall sets on the edge of the Sacramento River. Trouble is only a wall away. The wall was erected in 1983 after City Hall was flooded by high tides. It was supposed to be sufficient, and so far it has been. But earlier today, at 11 o'clock this morning, water was within 6 inches of the top, and it had people scrambling. Crews hastily erected a sandbag wall around the back side of the building, barely keeping it dry, as tides reached a record high here. Upstream, Vieira's resort was not so lucky.
My Mercury's under, my Cadillac's under, and your Mazda, you can't even see it.
100 people had to be evacuated with what little they could grab. The river suddenly went over its bank at 5 o'clock this morning. So a lot of people tonight are in Red Cross shelters like this at Rio Vista High School.
Well, last night we slept on a levee, you know. We were kind of scared, you know. It would break loose.
The Tomorrow, the whole scene could get worse. Tides are expected to be 7 or 8 inches higher than today. That could put a lot of other islands, farms, and homes underwater. In Rio Vista, I'm John Fulmer, News Center 4.
Governor George Duke Machen took a first-hand look at some of the storm damage today. First stop, Santa Rosa, where he was taken to an evacuation center to meet storm victims. The governor has declared a state of emergency in a dozen Northern California counties. It's the first step in getting federal aid to fix up and rebuild. One of the hardest-hit areas is Sonoma County, right along the Russian River. News Center 4's Lila Peterson has been reporting there since the start of the storm, and she has an update for us tonight.
With the last light of the western sky, the final rescue crew came back from Guerneville tonight. With 1,400 people airlifted out of the flood-stricken town, the National Guard's work here is almost done. But in Guerneville, the work is just beginning.
I'm ready to cry. It's pretty devastating.
Everywhere you look, there's flood damage. Merchants who've been able to get to their stores are overwhelmed.
It's a disaster, absolutely. And we need help as much as we can get to get back on our feet.
But that will take months. Most people can't get back to their homes. They are still underwater. This building survived the big floods of 1955 and 1964, but as you can see, it didn't make it through this flood. All day, rescue boats cruise the flooded river looking for stranded people. And throughout the downtown area, people said repeatedly they just couldn't believe what the Russian River had done. Many people living here have little or no flood insurance. In Guerneville, Lila Peterson, News Center 4.
In Napa, the floodwaters are receding, and most of the evacuees have been allowed to return to their homes. News Center 4's Vic Lee has been keeping us posted on the situation in the wine country all throughout this storm. He joins us now live with our News Star 4 technology. Vic, what's the latest now?
Well, the latest is that the rain has stopped, and what you're looking at is not a city dump. These used to be the belongings of the Braun family who live in this house over here. And all of this represents 23 years of their lives. Now, the Braun family, along with thousands of others, return home for... Whoa! Clumsy me, return home for the first time today to begin the massive cleanup. There's not much activity here tonight, but here's what it looked like earlier this evening. Take a look at the videotape. When night fell, most of the people in this neighborhood went back to the homes of relatives and friends. A few stayed on to continue the massive cleanup. Ron Ward, his family and friends have been here since daybreak.
All the furniture is gone. Everything was wet.
Tonight, the actual cleanup. The muddy floors had to be mopped. Everything had to be washed thoroughly. Nothing escaped the mud. A couple of houses down, the home of the Mel Homan family. They, too, were working late. Most of their belongings were beyond saving, but they did manage to retrieve some family snapshots. But most of them were destroyed.
The keepsakes are gone. They're just, you know, you can replace furniture and the material thing, but you can't replace those things, and that's what hurts.
Sylvia, I better sit down because it's safer. But Mr. Holman says that he hates to start all over again so late in life, but life must go on, and that seems to be the sentiment of a lot of people here in Napa.
Well, I'm sure it is. And the other night you fell in the creek. I
better get home.
I think it's time for you to come home. Thank you, Vic, reporting live tonight from Napa. And Marin County residents are also picking up the pieces after storms roared through their county. Road conditions have improved and floodwaters are starting to recede. But the storms have uncovered a strange sight. This gigantic sinkhole is threatening to swallow up 3 luxury homes in Tiburon tonight. The hole is 150 feet long and 85 feet deep, and it's growing. It was created when an abandoned railroad tunnel under the area was flooded by the storm and collapsed.
In the hills around the South Bay, mudslides remain a constant problem tonight. In Santa Cruz County, 2 homes have been destroyed, and 1 person remains missing. Her home crushed last weekend by a mudslide. Major slides blocked Highway 17 most of the day, stranding thousands of motorists. Highway 9 was also blocked at times today. The mudslides are also endangering a number of hillside homes, and officials expect more problems if the county is hit by more storms. Of course, weather is the big problem that we've had all week around the Bay Area, but of course, we are hoping that the worst is over, and Mark Thompson fills us in now on the latest. Mark?
We can all breathe a sigh of relief tonight because it does look like the worst is over. I see just a few showers offshore, And I'd promised a series of satellite pictures since last Thursday tonight. We will not be able to show them because we don't have time, but we will show them tomorrow night at 6 o'clock so you'll get a sense of the entire storm series as it emerged late last week. And if we don't have time at 6 o'clock tomorrow, I'll buy time on a cable station somewhere and we'll do it together. All right, let's take a look. Seasonal rainfall we'll get to in just a minute, but the rainfall here in the Bay Area has been snow in the high country. Right now, moderate to heavy snow, 2 to 3 inches an hour. Look at this, Jim. You'll love this once the dust rises. 17 inches of new snow since noon today. In the Sierra, over 2.5 feet in the last 24 hours. US 50, of course, closed indefinitely. I-80 is closed from Truckee to Reno. My sources at Caltrans tell me that will probably be closed for another week or so. Now, rainfall on the entire season. You may be curious how we've done.
Wow.
21.92 inches in the city of San Francisco, normally 13.96 inches. So we are well in excess of where we should be. 13.75 in the South Bay, 9.37, so we're about 4 1/3 inches ahead of normal in the South Bay, about 8 inches above normal, I guess, in the city. By the way, both those rainfall totals for the entire season exceed what we'd expect in an entire year. So thus far, we've had more rain around the Bay Area than we'd expect in an entire year. 5.5 inches for the storm at San Jose. These are all storm totals. Take a peek at the place of most interest to you. Napa, close to 25 inches of rain in the last 7 days. Over 17 inches in the North Bay, East Bay, over 13 inches. I'll take you back to the last 24 hours anyway, and you can see the back edge of the heaviest precipitation moved through last night. This was the associated thunder shower activity as it rumbled through primarily in the overnight hours, a bit in the first part of today. Then we got substantial clearing offshore and just periods of scattered showers. Polar jet stream has taken a pretty dominant role in our weather to the north. The subtropical jet stream, responsible for all the drenching rains the last week or so, is now weakening substantially and being further weakened by this high pressure. It will be pinched off, and that subtropical flow will be cut off. I'm looking at this just to be some high clouds and perhaps scattered showers over the next couple of days. In essence, we will clear. We'll see diminishing showers overnight with clearing skies and just a chance of some showers tomorrow. You can still see some pretty heavy showers in the Sierra foothills. That's why some of those flash flood advisories are still being watched for some of the foothill counties. Showers, though, should diminish overnight. Possibly a thunderstorm lingering, 40s and 50s. Tomorrow, in some of the cold, unstable air, a thunder shower is possible, but not likely. Certainly a scattered shower is possible. I think we still will look at a few scattered clouds, but nothing on the magnitude of the things we've seen of the last week. That is over. Heavy snow ending tomorrow. Snow level at 5,000 feet. Daytime highs tomorrow in the 30s in the Sierra. So, aside from a scattered shower over the next few days, I think we are absolutely out of the woods. As I say, nothing on the level of the sort of thing we've experienced over the last week. Everyone breathe a sigh of relief. We should see some drying for Saturday, most definitely.
And the worst of the flooding was over. The storm dealt one more devastating blow. Southern Yuba County is the victim of more flooding tonight after a fragile levee at the confluence of the Yuba and Feather Rivers collapsed, sending floodwater crashing through the town of Linda. National Guard helicopters have been called out. People are being plucked from their rooftops where they had to scramble to escape the floodwaters. John Fowler is standing by near that area, has a live report for us. John.
Dennis, the highways and the roads all around the Marysville area, 40 miles north of Sacramento, are jammed tonight. There's nothing but brake lights to be seen. 20,000 people are trying to flee the rapidly rising water in the towns of Linda and Olivehurst. There are low-lying towns along the swollen Yuba River. Just after 6 tonight, a 40-foot section of the levee south of Marysville collapsed, sending a wall of water into a mall and a low-income residential area in the town of Linda. Much of that town is reported now under about 8 feet of water. Officials are ordering emergency evacuations. National Guard helicopters are ferrying out residences. Ambulances from neighboring counties have been called in. We have some unconfirmed reports of injuries. Emergency shelters are being set up in in Sutter County schools on high ground, also at Beale Air Force Base. All phones and electricity is out to this area. That's compounding the already difficult evacuation process. Many people literally had to run from their lives from the rising floodwaters, some escaping with barely more than the clothes on their back. This is unquestionably the worst disaster in the history of this area, and it's going to take at least until tomorrow at daylight to see just how bad it is. If we come back live here, we are in the KOVR newsroom in Sacramento. We cannot get into that area because of the blocked and the flooded roads, and that's the latest from here. Barbara Dennis, let's go back to you.
Thank you, John. John Fowler with the latest on the reports of thousands of people evacuated near Marysville, north of Sacramento. We will bring you the latest information as we get it. Barbara.
Dennis, today in the Delta region south of Sacramento, people fought a desperate and sometimes losing battle against levee breaks in low-lying farmland. The Delta waters ebb and flow in tides like an inland sea, and this afternoon the tide there hit a 40-year high. The little town of Thornton was one major battlefield today. Randy Shandebo reports.
Too much pressure from too much water for too long a time. Early this morning, the McCollum River burst through the Thornton levee about 30 miles south of Sacramento. Within hours, thousands of acres of prime farmland and dozens of houses were flooded. Still, most of the town's 1,300 residents were safe, protected by an inner levee, a Western Pacific Railroad trestle. Workers tried to reinforce the trestle, but soon the water crept to the top, ready to spill over. Then bubbles developed and water began rushing in from underneath. Finally, even worse news.
Here it comes, it's coming. That's going, that's going to go, this whole thing's going.
You could see the inner levee crumbling. You could hear the panic in the workers.
We need to get out of here, gentlemen. Come on, go.
The water began to spread. Most Thornton residents had been evacuated earlier, but just in case anyone was left behind, there was a mad scramble.
Check all the houses! Check all the houses!
Even the fire department fled to higher ground. They'd turn off all the town's power behind them.
The fire chief feels that it's time to get out of town. So when the fire department bells out, I guess that's give up the town. Huh? It's time for you fellas to get out too.
A county supervisor rushed in at the last minute thinking perhaps something could still be done to save the town.
Everybody else is standing around looking at it, and that's not going to get the job done. We've got to get in there and start to dump something or forget it, one of the two.
But the sheriff's department overruled him. They wanted out too.
We have to leave for our safety.
Suddenly, the erosion slowed down. Water trickled through the flimsy railroad trestle, but for hours it held off the onslaught. This is what was left, a ghost town waiting for disaster. Only the sound of emergency helicopters in the distance. Otherwise, total silence. Just north of Thornton, toward Sacramento, Interstate 5 was flooded. Traffic on the big highway swamped and stopped. So the Highway Patrol allowed hundreds of evacuees to camp out on a freeway overpass. A view of their dreams about to be washed under.
I can't do anything to help, so I just have to watch. Won't even let me go get my van. The dog's at the house, and they won't let you in. Do nothing. This is the highest ground, I guess.
It is the highest, yeah. Well, if it gets up this high, adios.
They wouldn't let me back in to get anything out. Goddamn cops want to arrest everybody. I got my animals out, and they wouldn't let me back in to get anything else. That was it.
I was down, and they kicked me out. I've been up here for 4 hours just waiting. I could have had everything out. It makes you cry.
One man refused to cooperate with officials. He had more he had to get out of his house.
Behind her back. No, I walked across the field.
Just felt you had to.
I had to, because my wife forgot the important papers.
Finally, late this afternoon, the wait was over. The news was bad. The railroad levee broke. The water moved in. Farmland, a cannery, the town's biggest employer, houses, cars, everything these people are about. Soon, it will be gone. In Thornton, Randy Shandebo, KTVU, Channel 2 News.
Tonight, the battle for the Delta continued in Walnut Grove. That town was threatened by leaks in the levees there. Civilian volunteers, CCC workers, and fire personnel were brought in to sandbag and to dig through the leaking part of the levee and try to stop up the leaks. The levees were rebuilt with plastic, and tonight it's hoped that they're going to hold. Officials are concerned, though, about tomorrow in Walnut Grove when the Delta tide rises again.
In western Nevada, near Reno late today, powerful floodwaters ruptured a main natural gas pipeline, cutting off heat to thousands of people in Nevada and in the California Sierra. As the Truckee River surged through the town of Wadsworth, Nevada, a geyser-like plume of gas spewed through the water into the air. The gas cutoff made conditions even worse for residents struggling with dangerous flood and snow conditions. The worst flooding has occurred in the town of Sparks, where 300 homes have been evacuated and where floodwater is threatening more houses, thousands more houses. Officials say the gas cutoff affects about 70,000 people. Many people who withstood the floods now have to evacuate because they have no heat. So far, repair crews have not been able to reach the damaged pipe because of the flood conditions. The great storms of '86 are bringing floods or the threat of floods to places normally safe from such dangers. Lodi in San Joaquin County is one of those places. The same river that broke levees in Thornton today is rising to the north in Lodi. As Claude Mann reports, the city now faces flood danger from two sides.
As far back as anyone can remember, flooding has never been a problem in Lodi. But for 2 days now, residents of the luxury homes along McCullamy Creek in Lodi and dozens of volunteers have been sandbagging their homes and preparing to evacuate in the face of a very serious flood threat.
We've had kids from the CCD, we've had kids from Lodi High, we've had kids from every high school. We have people, teachers from Sac State who were here working today because they couldn't go to work up in Sac. Great people.
The danger comes not from the skies, but from the rain and runoff swollen Comanche Reservoir, 30 miles northeast. For the first time since Comanche Dam was built 22 years ago, the reservoir is full to overflowing, and 7,000 cubic feet of water a second is still flowing in from the storm runoff and melting Sierra snow. This morning, East Bay Mud began releasing 5,000 cubic feet of water a second to protect the dam. Now, any faster release will flood Lodi and the surrounding orchards and farmlands. The controlled release buys time for residents. And here in the creekfront area, they're taking full advantage of that.
We're evacuating. We have to. This is what we were told. We will be staying with friends, or we've had many opportunities and many offers from friends, neighbors, and people that we don't even know have called and asked to help.
If the rain holds off, there should be no danger before tomorrow afternoon. But the effects of even the controlled release from the reservoir have been dramatic.
Right there in the middle where you can see the buoy, there's 15 feet of water standing right there.
And normally that would be dry this time of year?
Completely dry. You could walk across, no problem.
The flow of water into the reservoir is about half what it was yesterday, but residents have been told to expect some flooding.
It would get anywhere from 2 feet to 4 feet in terms of water going into the home. That's why that was only 4 feet high.
The potential for disaster here is very real, and if that creek does overflow, the damage could run into the millions of dollars. But the people here have two things going for them. One, they have enough lead time to do something about it, to prepare for the flooding. And number two, there's a neighborhood spirit here like nothing I've ever seen before. In Lodi, Claude Mann, KTVU Channel 2 News.
Floodwater in Sacramento kept firefighters from saving a burning house late today, but the incident may end up as something of a blessing in disguise for the owner. Fire crews simply could not get close enough to the blaze with their fire trucks and other vehicles. They could only stop on the flood-choked roads and watch the house burn. But the owner of the house is probably luckier than his neighboring flood victims. Few people are insured against catastrophic floods, but most people do have fire insurance. There's more storm news to come from the Central Sierra. The first look at a big avalanche that roared down the slopes near some ski resorts.
And in the South Bay, soggy hillsides are continuing to fall apart, causing a lot of damage. We'll have those stories and more when we return.
This week in avalanches in Alta, Utah, but today in Colorado, explosives were used to create avalanches. The man-made avalanches that help control massive snowslides caused damage to telephone poles and a ski lift in the Arapahoe Basin of Colorado. A witness who saw 16-year-old Paul Moskovich buried in the avalanche yesterday at Alta Ski Resort said that it gave no warning. He said that he watched as it hit the trees, made a loud bang, and covered the victim all in a matter of 5 seconds. No other victims of avalanches have been reported since yesterday. And in the Sierra, one person is still missing in the aftermath of an avalanche in the Twin Lakes area. That's near Mammoth. That avalanche swept down the mountain 2 days ago, badly damaging at least 6 homes. But because of the bad weather, rescue crews could not reach that area until today. With the exception of the one missing person, everyone else there appears to have made it through without injury. Traffic, however, into that area is still clogged. There are 2 major rock slides blocking roads there. One is on Highway 395 north of Mammoth. The other is on Twin Lakes Road.
The battle is on in the South Bay to save homes from mudslides that follow the storms. In the Santa Cruz Mountains today, the earth was moving again, bringing back grim memories of a killer slide there 4 years ago. Lloyd DeQuesta has a report.
The rain has stopped falling. The ground has not.
About 2 acres of mountainside on Hubbard Gulch Road in Ben Lomond came crashing down early this morning. Trees as high as 150 feet fell like toothpicks. In the path of the slide are 2 homes which may be engulfed by the flowing mud. At the top of the slide is another home which may lose its foundation. Everyone got out safely without injury. But now this neighborhood of about 40 homes has been closed off. It was the first big slide of the storm in Ben Lomond. 4 years ago, this mountain community gained infamy because of the killer Love Creek slide, which claimed 10 lives.
Well, right now it gives me a lot of memories of Love Creek, but it was pretty light. We had the normal things up to the slide of 82, but no real comparison compared to that disaster.
What do you plan to do now with this?
Well, we're waiting for Public Works. The county doesn't want to come in here until the slide quits moving. It is moving right now.
Meanwhile, 5 miles to the south in Boulder Creek, crews are still trying to clean out a creek that was hit by a slide about a week ago. It took out a house, and the woman who lived in that house is yet to be found.
The lady crossed the road over here, across the creek. I used to see her riding, and she had a couple dogs over there. And the only thing that's left is a dog pen.
Although Amy Retnowski has yet to be found, she has been listed as the only storm fatality in Santa Cruz County. A search for her has been suspended, and now officials are tending to the survivors. 6 of the 35 homes in the Boulder Brook slide area have been red zoned, too dangerous to live in. That's why California Youth Authority wards were out clearing the creek for the Forestry Department.
We're just opening up the middle of the channel so the streams, hopefully in the center again, can cut through some of the slide debris, some of the soil and colluvium, and get the flow off of the bank here so they can leave this, hopefully not undermine this house.
When the rain stops and the sun is shining, the mountains are a beautiful place. One veteran resident who has survived says the potential disasters are just